John Curtice is Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde. John, what are the polls saying on Boris Johnson? Do people outside the bubble of politics in Westminster really care about the party and this drinks party and the many drinks parties that have taken place?
Well, the answer to that, certainly from the polling that was done when this whole row first erupted, which of course was last month on that occasion in respect of an alleged gathering on the 20th of December 2020, I suppose the one that's now the centre of attention, the previous May. Certainly the evidence of that, well, two crucial things to take away. One was that when YouGov asked people, how did you feel when you saw the video of Allegra Stratton, his former press secretary, struggling to deal with defending that supposed party in December? 61% of them said angry. And of course, we've seen that with a lot of stories being circulating about people who kept to the rules, couldn't see loved ones who were dying, couldn't see people who were in care homes, etc., now feeling that they kept to the rules in much more difficult circumstances than those being endured by civil servants in 10 Downing Street, and therefore have lost patience for the Prime Minister. That's problem number one. Yes, some people feel visceral about this. The second problem is that we already know from last December that around 2/3 of people at that point just did not believe the Prime Minister. They felt he wasn't telling the truth. We've only had a little bit of polling, of course, because this story really only broke yesterday or the evening of the day before. For what it's worth, that polling certainly suggests that the proportion of people who think that the Prime Minister should resign seems to have gone up as compared with what it was in December. And perhaps crucially, one of the polls, at least yesterday, suggested there were now almost as many people who'd voted Conservative in 2019 who now thinks that he should resign as felt that he should not. So the trouble is for the Prime Minister, it's not just opposition voters who don't believe him and who think he's done the wrong thing. The problem for him is potentially people who voted for him 2 years ago, and that in the end is what's going to concern Tory MPs as they decide whether or not to pull the trigger and say to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the parliamentary party, that there should be a ballot as to whether or not he should remain as leader.
The thing is, governments expect to sink in the polls mid-term, which is where we are. When do these polling numbers trigger any real momentum for leadership change?
Well, I think the honest truth is that if Boris Johnson's problem was simply the polls at the moment, yes, there's a problem because the Conservatives have been, at least until by Christmas time, they were down to 31% in the wake of Partygate. They'd lost 6 points. But if that was the only problem, then yes, you're right. It may well be that Tory MPs will say, well, this can be turned around. The problem, however, is that, one, Boris Johnson doesn't have that many friends inside the parliamentary party. He became leader because people thought he was a winner. If he stops being a winner, there aren't the bonds of loyalty between him and many inside his party. And such bonds of loyalty as there were had already been eroded by the Owen Paterson affair, where he got MPs to vote to try to avoid the suspension of Owen Paterson, was an enormous flack about it. He reversed 24 hours later, but Tory MPs really felt that, like the Duke of York, they were marched up the hill, then marched down again and left with all the flack firing them. So that's problem one. Problem number two is that both the Owen Paterson affair and Partygate are part of what some Tory MPs, let alone opposition MPs, feel as part of a wider story, which this is a politician who is not terribly concerned about process and following regulation. Now, this has often been to Boris Johnson's advantage. Prorogue Parliament illegally, fine, at least amongst Leave voters and amongst those who are in favour of Brexit. The problem he now faces is that with both the Owen Paterson affair and with Partygate, there isn't anybody amongst the electorate at least, and I think amongst many of MPs, who think that these were justified reasons for trying to bend the rules. So now the question of Boris Johnson's style as a politician, his probity and his veracity are now centre stage. And if those are lost, it frankly is very difficult for an individual politician to recover from.
Sir John Curtice, Professor of Politics at the University of Strathclyde, thank you very much.